So today I'm going to talk about lichen glazes. Lichen glazes are a group of glazes that are all about surface. They are about making the surface crack. They're technically for sculpture, not for function. And the lichen glazes have one major material that causes the crawling. Remember, in functional ceramics, we try to avoid crawling, crazing, cracking, things happening that are bad to the surface glaze or glass. But by adding magnesium carbonate to this base recipe, the more you add, the more it fractures and it stays dry. So the lichen glazes are used for sculpture. I use them a lot on my brains. So this brain has two different colors of slips on it, and the lichen glaze is a black today. In the classroom, I usually mix up a batch of this where it's just clear or white, and then we add colorants to it like your colored slips, and we can get a whole range of colors of lichens. And this is specifically for cone 04 or 1900 degrees approximately. We will also be talking about another one that goes a little bit hotter, but it becomes more bubble-like. It becomes more like beaded surface versus dried out. Technically, I always tell people it looks like dragon skin or dragon scales. So with lichens, you just paint them on your pieces. And the first layer, especially if you haven't bisque fired the slip on, you want to just dab it on and you'll just cover it. What happens is this glaze will pull away and we'll see the blue underneath it. It'll actually crawl up and the blue will be the undercolor. So you can see I'm just going to keep dabbing and working my way around. And I like doing this on my brains because then I have a cracked brain. So you paint your first layer on, and then move to the other side because I have handles on the back here because this brain hangs on the wall. That way it doesn't get away. If you put it on thin, it's not going to do what it needs to do. Okay? And the way to tell that you put it on right is as soon as it dries, it should physically start cracking. And you should see it look like a fractured egg a bit. So there's my first layer. And now I have to wait for this to dry. Once it's dry, I can see where it's fractured, and if there's no fractures, then I'll add another layer. Let that dry all the way. Once the surface starts pulling away and large cracks start appearing in it, it's ready to be put back onto the glaze shelf for cone 04 or the bisque shelf, and then go through the bisque again. And then when it comes out, it'll be completely fractured because of the magnesium carbonate in it, and it'll be dry. And that's the main principles behind lichen glazes. So here you can see this brain has been drying out. You can see the cracks coming up about on the surface. So this is what you're looking for when you're painting with a lichen glaze. You want to see those cracks before you fire. If you don't see those cracks before you fire, then you're not going to get very good results. So now that the first layer is dry, I'm going to go ahead and add another layer. The crevices usually get a really thick coat because that's where the glaze goes to. So now I'm trying to get a little bit more on the flat, higher surfaces to cause this brain to have an even more cracked effect. So again, just dabbing it on in the spots I want to accentuate the lichen surface as I go. Some areas I'm not going to add to, like the edges, mostly because that's where people are going to touch. Now, if you have a proper lichen glaze that goes to the right temperature, it's not going to be very fragile. It's going to be pretty hard to the touch, so it'll be hard to pick at your brain and break it apart. The bead glazes we'll talk about that are higher temperature. Those are really hard to knock off with your fingers once they're fired. So here's the second layer. We're going to let that dry, and it's ready to go outside and get fired.